lie to all the people of the country, and I just don't think I'm equipped to do that.
Right. Well, I was a little excited when you wrote in your book that if Ron Paul chose to go on an independent ticket, which I wish you would have done in the beginning, that you would consider running with him.
Yeah, in fact, I've even been bolder than that now. I've said this. In 2016, between now and then, if a grassroots in this country rose up and they got me ballot access in all 50 states, and it didn't cost a great deal of money to do it, and it would just be hard work. If the people would get me ballot access in all 50 states, and if they would be so vocal that they could guarantee that I'd be included into the debates in 2016, I probably would run if those two criteria were met. I need to have ballot access in all 50 states, and I need to be guaranteed that I'm allowed to participate in the debates, because if you're not allowed in the debates, you have no chance of winning.
Absolutely. And, Ron Paul, at the end of the convention, Romney wanted Ron Paul to speak, but he wanted basically to censor whatever Ron Paul was going to say. And Ron Paul...
Well, he wanted Ron Paul to give him a full endorsement, and Paul wouldn't do it.
Well, you can't blame him. But, after that, I don't know if you heard, when Ron Paul and his wife were leaving the convention, they were super harassed before they could get on their plane by the TSA.
Really?
Yeah, and I guess his wife has some kind of, I don't know if it's a pacemaker or something, and she couldn't go through the machine, and he certainly didn't want his wife touched. And a lot of commentators said that it was almost like giving him the final blow on the way out.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
How sad is that?
They didn't like Ron Paul because Ron Paul isn't a company man and he won't sell his soul.
Right. Well, right before our show, somebody sent me some information that Walmart is backing Rahm Emanuel and his craziness against the teacher strike in Chicago. And the first thing I posted, thanks to reading your book and having a good memory, is you wrote in your book that the CEO of Walmart makes $19,000 an hour.
Yep.
And yet still doesn't want school teachers to get paid anything, maybe $19,000 a year.
Yeah, exactly. Walmart CEO makes it. Well, here's one for you. Did you know that all these major corporations, they pay out more money to lobbyists than what they pay in taxes?
Oh, I do know that. And they have, 2 lobbyists for every member of Congress?
Oh, I'm sure. So what does that tell you? It clearly shows, people need to wake up. The Democrats and Republicans have created a system that's based completely upon bribery. If you bribe them and give them large amounts of money, you'll get an audience and you'll get special favors from them. Try being a citizen that doesn't show up with a big check. They won't even talk to you.
Right.
And that's in essence the problem with the whole thing. I mean, if we committed bribery in the private sector, we go to jail.
Right.
And yet they have an entire system based upon it.
Well, you can't put a corporation in jail, and wasn't it Romney himself who said that corporations are people?
Yeah, exactly. And corporations can't go to jail.
You have to laugh, because if you don't, I think your mind would snap. But I want to tell you did a great job covering Jack Abramoff in your book.
Oh, thanks.
And, a lot of people, have forgotten the pizza delivery guy's name and what happened with that. But the fact that you bring him in, and I can't make up my mind. Is he trying to score points before he dies and goes to heaven by exposing what he does? Or do you think he's being for real?
I don't know. I think that maybe now that he's gone to jail, he might be for real.
Mm-hmm. Well, either that or having to deliver pizzas for a living when he got out. That had to suck. You talk about no parties and as the solution. And I know a lot of people might say that's crazy, although I have been recommending since our last show that everybody just write in, like you said, none of the above. And I found out that in Nevada that you actually can check a box that says none of the above. I never knew that.
I didn't either. And the reason, here's a simple thing that could be done that would be monumental. Why do we allow the party names on a ballot?
Mm-hmm.
Put just the candidate, and this could be done on a local level, I think, unless the feds came in and overruled, which they probably would. But at the local level, it seems they could pass ordinances that would remove party names and put just the candidates down. See, they make it too simple. If you're a conservative, you don't have to know who's running. You just look for Republican. If you're liberal, you don't need to know the candidates. You look for liberal or for Democrat.
Right.
Remove those names. Then it becomes imperative to the voter to educate themselves. What does John Smith stand for? Now, the parties could still endorse, just like the teachers' union or the firemen's union or anything like that.
Right.
They could still endorse candidates, and you could seek their endorsement. But why are they allowed to put political parties on a ballot? They should only put candidates' names.
Because they know, first of all, most people, hate to say it, Jesse, are lazy and stupid. And they're going to give me that same crap I've heard for years. You know, my parents were Republicans, my grandparents were Republicans, and I'm going to die a Republican. Well, it looks like we're all going to die Republican or Democrat.
Well, that's all fine and dandy, but the names don't have to be on a ballot, do
I
they?
agree, but if they're not, they figure the people won't know who to vote for.
Well, I'd prefer that better. Let them just go in and randomly pick a name then. I'd like that better than the system we have right now.
Hey, I agree. Now, if you think about it, when they have Miss America contests, well, they have 50 contestants, okay, for Miss America. And yet, when it comes down to electing the most important job in our country, we only really get 2 choices.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is the 2 choices are handpicked by the 2 gangs. You know, so you don't really get to choose your president, the 2 gangs do.
Well, you did a great job exposing the money people behind both parties, from Randy Simmons to Sheldon Adelson. Who a lot of people have no idea of, the Koch brothers, or I like to call them the Koch brothers, and I always add a second word to that. But we'll keep the show clean today. But people don't have any idea that this election is truly being selected by 16 people.
Now, Meria, China could determine our next president. Because all China would have to do is form a corporation, and they could contribute multitudes of money to whatever candidate of their choice.
Oh, well, that is...
So you could have a foreign country actually influencing, in light of that Supreme Court decision, that corporations have the same rights as humans and that money is free speech. So you could have China enter our elections quietly by forming themselves and calling themselves a corporation, and they could pump billions of dollars to whatever candidate they wanted to, and of course that candidate would be completely beholden to them for doing that.
Well, think about it. You know, I call them the Supreme Court of Injustice. I mean, they had no problem passing that Citizens United. Now Obama is saying he wants to, reverse that. But of course, after the 2012 election.
Right.
Everything is after the next election. I've heard this for 60 years, okay? It's going to get better after the next election. It's just like what I love.
When a new administration comes in, the first thing they tell you is it's time to move forward. We're not going to look back. Well, that's because, it must be what they do so that whoever was there before them will never face any criminal charges, because as far as I'm concerned, Bush and Cheney should be up for war crimes.
Right, and the only person that's even talking about that is Desmond Tutu, who just said the same thing.
I've heard that Bush can't travel internationally because there's a few countries that might arrest him. Is that true?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Actually, I know somebody in Canada that tried to.
Crimes in the war on Iraq with the torturing of the people and all that he okayed the torture.
Well, of course. And, of course, let's face it, Obama, hope and change. He didn't do anything to prosecute Bush or anybody in his administration. He could let them all off the hook, just like they always do.
Well, we had to move forward.
Yeah, move forward to what?
We have to move forward. And how about those poor people at Gitmo? Nobody from 9/11 has been prosecuted for anything.
No, and I think this more...
You know why I think they're not going to do it? Because I don't think they have any evidence.
Well, today they found the 9th dead prisoner in Gitmo. He was on a hunger strike. They tried to say they didn't know who he was, and then, of course, the truth came out about who he was. And it's a guy who was actually pardoned and was supposed to be released, who was still rotting in there.
Yeah, well, Obama said he'd shut it down. Well, apparently he hasn't, has he?
No, the only thing they shut down is
I wonder
inquiring
how many
minds.
people we have hidden in hidden jails throughout the world.
Probably quite a few. What about, I love that you take on the private prison industry in this country, too, in your book. You've talked about...
Horrible. Now, everyone says downsize government and turn it over to corporations. So they've done it with our prison system. Well, remember something. Corporations are strictly bottom line, profit. Mm-hmm. And in order for the private corporations to be profitable running our prisons, they need like an 80 or 90% fill rate. That's why they throw everybody in prison who use drugs.
Right. Well,
so that they can fill up the prisons so that the corporate prisons can make a profit.
Well, they said they would take over state prisons if they're guaranteed a 90% occupancy, like they're the Marriott.
Yeah.
Okay. It would be cheaper to put prisoners in the Marriott, to tell you the truth.
It probably would be, and it's ridiculous that we also show the figures on capital punishment, and I forget we're like in 5th place behind 4 of these just lovely countries.
I mean, I know. Well, at least we're number 1 in death and dismemberment. I think
yeah.
we rate right up there. What do you think about the so many Americans that are switching over to the independents and how desperate these two parties seem to be to seduce them?
Let me tell you this. You're not an independent unless you vote an independent. I don't buy that people are independent that just simply jump back and forth between the Democrats and Republicans from year to year. That is not an independent. They're the problem. They need to vote, like I'm encouraging everyone to vote for Governor Gary Johnson, the former New Mexico governor who's running under the Libertarian Party.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you're truly an independent, is when you don't vote for the two major parties. So anybody that says they're an independent and still votes for a Democrat and Republican, in my book, they're not an independent. They're just undecided between the two gangs.
Right. Well, I can tell you I've been a registered independent and vote independent. But now it's like, why even bother voting? That's the way I look at it now.
Well, that's true, but, I would love, I always hold hope because I won in Minnesota and they told me I couldn't win. In fact, here's a good one. They always tell you if you vote for a third party, you're wasting your vote. I would now reverse that and say if you vote for a Democrat or Republican, you're wasting your vote because you're going to get the same government. They're both bought off by the same corporations. You'll get the same government with either side. Truly, if the only vote that counts is if you don't vote for a Democrat or Republican.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. I like to just read a little piece out of towards the end of your book. George Washington set the example. He was elected as an independent before any parties existed. Besides Washington, 2 other presidents, John Tyler and Andrew Johnson, switched to independent while in office. And, I got to tell you, I was very disappointed that Ron Paul didn't go, from the get-go as an independent.
Yeah, I was too. I really and truly wished he would have. But, in a way, though, he was smart. He should have did it right after the convention, and I'll tell you why.
Mm-hmm.
Because he needed the TV time. And if he simply ran as an independent from the get-go, mainstream media would have completely ignored him.
Well, that's true. He did get to say what he had to say.
It was a smart move to stay with the Republicans for a few months, but at some point when he realized he wasn't going to get it, he should have then, right in a debate, said, I'm quitting the Republican Party and I will now run as an independent.
I agree, and people immediately started a petition to get him to do that, right after.
Unfortunately, I guess he won't do it.
Well, it's our loss on so many ways.
Yeah, but there's still an alternative, Gary Johnson.
Well, the alternative is anybody but the two-party system, or as you call it, government sacks.
Yep.
I'm using that one. I stole that one right off the top. As soon as I saw it in your book, I said, wow, this is very clever. I'll be using this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You're free to use it because that's what they are. Both sides are totally indebted to Goldman Sachs, or as we call them, government sacks.
Right. Jesse, I know that you've got quite a heavy schedule. Any parting words for the audience?
Well, I'd just like to tell the audience to show courage in this election and really stand up. And, the more votes Gary Johnson gets, the more it will terrify them. I understand that he doesn't have a chance to win because he's not allowed in the debates, but it could build momentum to the future. And when people go out to vote, remember, you're not required to vote for one of the two parties. There's alternate choices on there, and I really wish they'd exercise that option, because the road they're taking us down is the road to ruin. The United States of America